Hi, Emmy.
Hi. Trying to see that here. Up. Oops. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. I know it's almost to the finish line of the year. We'll wait a couple minutes just to let people filter in. If there's any school reps that have any announcements, just feel free to jump in when we get to that portion of the meeting as well. Welcome, everybody. We'll wait one more minute before we get going here. Okay, so welcome everybody to our December general meeting. Thank you for being here tonight. Our agenda, we have our executive board updates, rep announcements if we have any representatives who want to make an announcement. And then we have our Q&A with Dr. Menzel. And then we have Tiffany Lamb here from the Arizona Attorney General's office, and she's going to talk about internet safety for parents. So as far as our updates, I listed all of our general meetings for the year. For next year, we're anticipating they'll be virtual. If things change and we can do it safely in person, then we can certainly do that. But these are the dates, and we have several of the months planned out, but a couple of the later months, we are still looking for topics that we want to focus on. So if you have any ideas, feel free. If there's something you want to hear from someone in particular from the district, please feel free to reach out to us and we will try to work that in. And these are just our monthly general meetings. We'll have lots of different events throughout the year as well, focused on specific topics or special speakers. And then at the end of January, we're going to have a school rep mixer. So the SPC representatives from each school, we're going to do a virtual event. Rose and Rachel are putting that together. So just a way to get people to be able to interact some more with each other and get to know each other better. So they will be reaching out to you with details on that. But January 28th at 6 is the date. So mark that down. And then rep announcements. Is there any representatives that have anything they wanted to announce? Can't really see my screen, so.
Yeah, Emmy, it's Lisa Canaris from Sequoia. I just wanted to say that for the 22nd year, Sequoia, Cherokee, and Cochise elementary schools participated in our Angel Tree program with the Bethune K-8 pre-K through 8 school, which is a public school in South Central Phoenix. And on behalf of the Sequoia community, we would just like to thank all of the generous parents that donated gifts in order to make this a better holiday for the students of Bethune. The gifts were delivered yesterday, and a masked Santa who was safely distanced wished the children a happy holiday, and the smiles and the excitement were awesome. So that's what we wanted to say.
Thank you, Lisa, for sharing that. Anyone else? Okay, then I will jump ahead to our Q&A. So we have Dr. Menzel has joined us, and we have Jill is back this week to ask our questions that were submitted ahead of time. So go ahead, Jill, take it away.
All right. First, I'm so sorry, but I forgot to do our land acknowledgement at the beginning. So I want to make sure I do that. We wish to acknowledge the land on which this SPC meeting is taking place. For thousands of years, it's been the traditional land of the Hohokam, the Akimel O'odham, and most recently, the Salt River Pima Indian community. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Maricopa, and we're grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on this land. So thank you. Sorry I missed that earlier. All right. Hi, Dr. Menzel. How are you doing?
Good. How are you, Jill?
Fantastic. Let's see here. We have a short night for you. So, that's your treat. That's your December treat. So first question, for anyone who did not have a chance to listen to the latest board meeting, can you describe what returning to school after winter break will look like?
Sure. And before I start that, I would say that if you haven't checked your email recently, you should have an update that explains this as well, so you don't have to take notes. We were able to get that sent out in English and Spanish this afternoon. But at the governing board meeting last night, we reviewed the current status of the benchmark metrics, what we expect to be the case when the data comes out tomorrow, based on a conversation with Dr. Sonnenschein, plus new information from the Maricopa County Department of Public Health related to how a district can reopen after the 3 benchmarks move into red. And that was one of the conversations that we hadn't had previously, is what happens after you get to the point where the 3 benchmark indicators are in red. The specific email that I read at the governing board table is in the letter that we sent out to everyone, so that parents in our community can see exactly what information the board was using as we made the determination for how to start the second semester. And I think there are a couple of things that are important. One, we adopted a phased-in approach in terms of returning to learning in the second semester, starting with our most vulnerable and youngest learners. So on January 4th, we'll bring back pre-K, elementary, and special education self-contained. The following week, middle school students, and then on January 19th, the plan is to bring high school students back to in-person learning. So similar to what we did in the fall, it's still a phased-in approach. One of the things that we discussed at the governing board table and also with health department officials is we've been using a school-by-school analysis. So not only looking at the community spread, which are important indicators, but not the sole determinant with respect to whether or not schools can remain open. Absent having students in school, you don't have that metric to be able to determine whether or not we're able to keep buildings open and how we can do that safely for our students and for our staff. So in discussing how this could play out, the Department of Public Health gave us guidelines. The governing board adopted an approach. They also indicated that it's important for me to continue having conversations with the health department, so that should anything change substantively between now and January 4th, that would modify the guidance that they gave us for the meeting last night, we'd be prepared to take action accordingly. And so that's the plan. We hope not to have to change the plan, but if it's required, we'll be prepared to do so. And as always, we're trying to find the right balance. We know that our students, many of them really need in-person instruction. We also want to be able to do that as safely as possible and supporting our staff who are delivering that in-person instruction. And so we're working the best that we can as a district to find that balance, to move forward in a way that meets the needs of our students and does it in as safe a manner as possible.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is, what is your point of view of parents turning in students or families who gathered without masks, social distancing, or with 3+ households?
So that's an interesting question. As you know, I've not been shy about talking about it's a community effort in order to keep our schools open. And so how families choose to either comply with mitigation recommendations or not comply impacts our ability to be able to stay open for in-person learning. And I'll continue to beat that drum because I think it's critically important. Um, I think on the flip side, it's very difficult if we have people who are reporting what other families are doing, because that gets into a place, one, where the district can't police. And secondly, it just feels kind of like an infringement. And I prefer to have high expectations for people to be honest and upfront, compliant where and when they can. Sometimes they make other decisions, but just like after Thanksgiving, we said, if you're traveling, please self-quarantine for a period of time. And we had 377 students that self-quarantined, at least that I knew of. So I believe that this community has by and large demonstrated that they're interested in doing what it takes to keep school open for in-person learning. And I don't think the entire community, and most specifically our children, should be penalized because there are some families that completely disregard it. And so it's, how do we manage that risk? How do we do the things to ensure that if someone has exposed themselves or their students, or they're in a position where it could be problematic, that they're taking the proper steps to ensure it doesn't spread in school, because that's our greatest concern. But I think the policing in the manner you described is one that the district can't certainly follow up on. So I think just reiterating the message that it takes all of us working together to keep our schools open is the critical point.
And side note, in the email tonight, I didn't see it, and if it is there, I apologize, but will you be also allowing that 2 week of self-quarantining for families that go out of town over winter break or whatever?
So it wasn't in this one, but it will be in the Friday communication that goes out to families. And because of the revised quarantine guidelines, we're really looking at the period so that students could come back on January 11th. It doesn't have to be the 2 full school weeks because the holidays on the 1st. And so arguably students could come back having missed only 1 week of school if they're not in that first group that's already started. If they're a group slated to come back on January 11th, they wouldn't have come to school during that period of time anyway. But our position will again be that if you've traveled over the holiday, especially around New Year's, we'll ask families to make the choice to self-quarantine for that week and come back on the 11th.
Okay, thank you. How are you working to ensure that all teachers who committed to in-person learning will show up after winter break as soon as the metrics deem it is safe to do so?
So we have incredible staff at Scottsdale Unified School District. I get a volume of email from staff who are concerned about our current situation, and I get emails from staff who are expressing appreciation for coming back in person. They know how much and how important it is for their students. We're trying to balance all of those needs and concerns and provide the support we can. As a district, I think that, and I'm saying this based on conversations with other districts in the Valley, we've done more in terms of trying to accommodate not only ADA, which is required, but people who have family with compromised health conditions, giving them priority for teaching online. And then even creating some modifications in an environment where initially our external legal counsel was urging us to proceed cautiously. We have 35 teachers teaching remotely where we're paying for subs in the classroom. So we've tried hard to accommodate the needs of our staff as best we can. But at this juncture, we also need our staff to be able to be in person to educate our students. And we've also acknowledged that in some cases, given concerns that they have, they might need to request leave of absence or make other decisions for themselves. And so we're trying to be as supportive as we can, recognizing that each individual needs to make a choice for themselves, in addition to what we have to make on behalf of the students in the system.
Okay, thank you for that. The school computers allow a lot more access to sites than my students' personal restricted personal device. If there's a website we believe should be restricted on SUSD devices, is there a place that we should submit that for review?
So there is. That should initially go to our Chief Systems Officer, which is Debbie Spalding, at least through January 6th. And And after that, whoever's in the role of chief systems officer. We've got a filtration system put in place. We've got SIPA requirements in terms of internet protection for students. You're going to hear a little bit more about some of the things that parents can do on the other end. But if there's a concern about a specific site that hasn't been blocked, sending that to Debbie Spalding allows for additional investigation to determine why it might have gone through the filter, and perhaps it's not met the threshold for needing to be blocked, but there might be some other reasons. And so it's impossible to catch everything. And so flagging that for her to review is important.
Okay, great. Thanks. We will share her contact information in the chat for you all. We know that you've been busy dealing with COVID, but have you been able to work on anything interesting or exciting that you want to share with parents here?
So it's a qualified yes. So, I mean, it has really been a lot of COVID almost all of the time. But we did, and I reported at the governing board table, we did select CAM Solutions as a consulting firm to assist us in our strategic planning, or what I like to call preferred futuring. And we'll begin that process after the first of the year with robust community engagement. So we want to engage as many of our parents as possible. We want to engage our staff at all levels, because they all have important contributions to make as we think about where Scottsdale Unified School District needs to be in the next 10 years. What are the hopes and aspirations of the community? What do we want for our children? And then we can create a plan that gets us from where we are, COVID crisis and all, to where we want to be. This is a district that's got a really high ceiling in terms of what we can do for kids. And so I think what's exciting is that even though the pandemic has consumed a lot of the oxygen, we have an opportunity as we moved into the new year to really begin to focus on the future and think about what's possible for our children in Scottsdale Unified School District. And to me, that's pretty exciting. So as we conclude this year, which I think most of us would agree is one that we're really happy to see get in the books, next year, I'm hopeful that we're going to be able to focus on some things that really get people's fires lit again in a way that is motivating, encouraging, and produces great outcomes for our students.
Awesome. And one final question. For those of us who have chosen to be to the safest and remain online, let's see. For those of us who have chosen to be safest and remain online, we have seen the most teacher and school change of all. Can you tell us how you will help keep things consistent for our EDL kids?
I appreciate that question. And I know this year has been extraordinarily disruptive. It's been disruptive for you as parents and for your students and for our teaching staff. And part of it is a product of providing 3 different options. So we didn't simplify. We tried to be as responsive as possible. That created part of our challenge. With respect to EDL, our second semester approach, while it does require some additional shifting of teachers, is designed so that is a program that doesn't have additional churning throughout the course of the second semester, so that the teachers will be committed to that. The students will be able to rely on the teachers being in that program. And so that's why we made that shift. And I think you remember, and I observed this myself, so I know just how difficult it is, and how grateful I am for what our elementary teachers tried to pull off between September and the end of the year, especially if you had a split classroom with 11 in person and 12 online, and you're in the 4th grade. We have amazing teachers, but being able to give our students the attention they need and deserve in that split environment in an elementary school really is not sustainable. So we made that shift, and we've tested it. We had our middle school and high school staff indicate that it's not nearly, I mean, it's a challenge, but it's not the same challenges at the elementary. So my commitment to the elementary teachers were that we wouldn't require them to do that second semester. That's why we have the EDL at Echo Canyon option, should provide the stability for the balance of the year. And no one then will be denied the ability to resume in-person instruction with their home school as we start school next fall. So it's about how do we get through this year? Families have been given the option to make the choices they need to for themselves, for their children, for their families. And we're going to work to do all that we can to ensure that that experience is high quality and consistent for the balance of the year.
Yeah, I think we can all agree that our teachers have been phenomenal this year with so much thrown at them. And just thank you, teachers. And thank you so much, Dr. Menzel, for being here as always at our monthly meetings and answering our questions, and for your support for our teachers and our students. And with that, we wish you a, very happy holiday season, and I hope you get some rest.
Thank you, Jill. If I don't have to wake up to an alarm, that'll be a good thing.
Yes.
But otherwise, I wish all of you a healthy and happy holiday season. We appreciate your commitment and support of Scottsdale Unified School District, our students and our staff. And I'm just grateful for the relationship we have, and look forward to even better things in the years to come.
Thank you very much.
Have a good night.
You too. Okay, so next up we have our presentation from Tiffany Lamb. So as I said, she's from the Arizona Attorney General Office, and she's here to talk about internet safety for parents. So welcome, Tiffany.
Hi, thanks for having me. All right. So good evening, everyone. My name is Tiffany Lamb, and I'm a community outreach coordinator for the Arizona Attorney General's office, as Emmy was just saying. So before COVID, that meant that I was traveling the whole state giving these presentations face to face. I would say my main audience were middle schoolers, but we'd also talk to high schoolers and elementary school students. Our internet safety presentation was by far the most highly requested program that we had. Oops. And I think even still it is, it's super relevant now, especially because there's not much that we or our kids can do to entertain ourselves at home other than to access the internet in some way, whether it's social media or, going on Netflix or playing Roblox or Minecraft. I think that's super popular with kids. There's a lot of different things that come with that. And there's a lot of things that I never thought about in terms of internet safety before I started training for this presentation. And there is one documentary that I'll bring up, which I'm sure maybe a few of you in the audience have seen, but it's actually on Netflix. It's called The Social Dilemma. And they talk a little bit more about what happens in your brains and our kids' brains when they are accessing the internet. And it's kind of crazy to think that, our thoughts and feelings and views towards certain things can be controlled and, I guess for lack of a better term, manipulated by, this device that we have sitting a couple of inches from our face for how many hours or, minutes a day. And that includes our kids because, if we are being so influenced by this as adults when our brains are already fully developed, then it's kind of scary to think about what it's doing to our kids at such a young age. So really quick before I get into this presentation some more, I always like to bring up that we have other topics that we talk about, and these are all totally free. You can request my office to come and talk to, if you're a part of a church or some other group. I've talked to different schools in Scottsdale. I saw someone brought up Cocoa Paw in the chat. We've talked to Cocoa Paw School before. And I think that we did talk about internet safety there actually. So we also have human trafficking is a topic that we bring up. I will actually bring up that topic throughout this presentation just because most human traffickers will actually now find their victims through online, which makes sense because they're wanting to use the same apps that our kids are using. And unfortunately, that is the age group that they are targeting. The average age that a kid is sex trafficked in Arizona is 14 years old, 14. And so I know that's an uncomfortable topic to talk about. And unfortunately, we don't get that requested very much. I think the reason for that is because parents fear that they're going to talk about a really uncomfortable topic to their kids when it's really young. But the truth is that there's not really a perfect age to talk to them about this topic. And you'd rather them hear from a factual source like us versus from an informal source like their friends, where they might tell them, misleading things about human trafficking. We also talk about e-cigarettes and vaping. They just released a survey that was done, and 1 in 20 middle school students vape and 1 in 5 high school students vape. So for those of you, whatever age your kids are, you might want to bring up that topic with them also, especially now because with quarantine, It's so boring. I feel like I'm losing my mind sometimes, and I'm sure that our kids feel that tenfold. And they might not even fully understand what this pandemic entails. So they might be more impressionable and more likely to try substances that they normally wouldn't. Which brings me to the next topic that we talk about, which is the opioid crisis. Make sure that you guys are going through your medicine cabinets and that you are tossing any prescription painkillers that you might have or anything else, you know, benzos, things like that, that our kids might be able to get their hands on, because most of the time kids say that it's very easy for them to go into their parents' medicine cabinets and to look for those types of substances. And especially with opioids, it's a very nasty addiction and it's a very slippery slope, and it's very easy to become physically dependent on them. So all right, let's just go ahead and get into it. This presentation will probably be about 40 minutes. I'll go ahead and take questions at the end. I'll go ahead and look through chat and I can answer them then. So first, we're going to talk about some popular apps. When I was giving this presentation in person, I would always like to take a poll with my students. And so we provided this presentation for kindergarten through 12th grade. Of course, they tier to each different group. So for K through 2, we would just show them like an internet safety video. But I would also ask these kids to raise their hands. I'm not sure to what extent they understand the question, because you know how kids can be, but I'll ask like K through 2, raise your hands if you guys either have Snapchat, Instagram, or TikTok. And I'll say for K through 2, I'll have at least like maybe 40 to 50% of students raise their hands, even though technically you should be 13 years old to have this. And then by the time I go through like 3rd grade, to 5th grade, I'll say it goes up to like 60, 70%. By the time I'm in middle school and high school, at least 80 to 90% of these students are using those apps that I just listed. And it does terrify me, just because we do know that there are cyber predators and human traffickers who do also use these same apps. And there's a lot of chat features for social media. In fact, most social media has an option to where you can chat to someone and they can make it seem like they're a nice person. It's very easy for someone to do. We all like to think that we're really good judges of character, but when it comes to the internet, the lines become very blurred, and it's very easy for someone to gain a child's trust, you know, just by chatting on them through this. But especially now with quarantine, like I said, we're super bored. Maybe our kids, who most likely wouldn't have normally answered a message from a stranger, is now finding themselves thinking, you know, well, what the heck, might as well, what's the worst that can happen, you know, something along those lines. So with Snapchat, primarily it's used to send images and videos. You can also chat on there. As you can imagine, if it's primarily used for this, there are also kids, and I do mean kids, who are also sending explicit videos or, you know, pictures of themselves. We will talk about sexting later throughout this presentation. You can also tag your location. There's this thing called Snap Map on this app where you'll scroll to this little map type thing, and it actually is very detailed. So if you have it to where your location can be shown with your friends or with whoever, you can basically zoom all the way in and it'll show that you're like at someone's house, and it'll show like the street names and all of that. So it's very detailed. So I always tell kids to make sure that they're putting themselves on ghost mode when they are using this. There are also Snapchat premium accounts. There are people who are also using that to have explicit content that can be purchased. And the thing with Snapchat, I think the reason why people assume that it's a platform that they can use in order to send this explicit content is because you can choose to send the image. It'll, you know, it can show up for 1 second when that person clicks on it, or up to 10 seconds, or until they click the picture away. So they just assume, well, once the picture disappears, that it's gone for good. But it's very easy to take screenshots of this types of stuff. Instagram, of course, is super popular. I'm sure you guys are familiar with Instagram. It's primarily, again, used for pictures and for videos. What I like to emphasize with Instagram is I like to talk about mental health quite a bit. I forgot to mention that we also have a suicide awareness presentation. And the reason for that is because suicide rates in Arizona for teenagers are actually slightly higher here than they are for the national average. And with COVID, there's a lot of mental health issues that have been going on. I recently had a very successful suicide presentation for a group of maybe like, I think it was 100 students that were 5th grade through 7th grade. And I have to admit, like the questions that I was getting afterwards, I was just absolutely in awe, because I found that I was relating to these kids too. You know, we might think that just because they're young that they're not going through anxiety or they don't have any reason to be stressed and things like that, but that's absolutely not true. But especially with COVID, my heart goes out to our kids, you know, because I am already struggling sometimes as it is with COVID. We've all had to accommodate in some way. It's drastically changed everyone's lives, but especially with our kids. So I do feel for them for having to go through a global pandemic at such a young age, because this is absolutely going to shape the way that they feel about the world in the future. And it's absolutely going to be something that they will remember. So going off of what I was saying with mental health and Instagram is that what worries me about platforms like Instagram and Snapchat is that they're very superficial. I have to say that if I had Instagram when I was in middle school, it would have absolutely killed my self-esteem. It would have been detrimental to my mental health, just because there's tons of models that are on there. There's a lot of filters that are used, a lot of Photoshop. And this is actually something that they touch up on in the documentary that I was talking about, Social Dilemma. It just really skews your perception of what beauty should be. And if you're constantly looking at your phone and seeing that you don't look like these other boys or girls, then it's not going to feel good on your self-esteem. And you might feel like the only time that you're pretty is if you use filters or whatever it is. And so I really emphasize that with children, is that I want them to know that they shouldn't be taking this information at face value, and to remember that people on social media are only posting the things that they want to post. They're posting how they want to be perceived. And it's very easy for that to get distorted with reality. So make sure that you talk to your kids about that also, because you know, I don't even have Instagram, which I'm like one of the only people my age who doesn't have one. I'm 26 years old. And whenever I tell people that, they're shocked. And it's just, I just don't like how I feel when I'm scrolling through different apps. And I imagine that kids feel the same way, because I will sometimes find myself bored and I'm like, why am I going through 5 different apps instead of doing something that's more productive, that's actually going to contribute to my happiness? And so it's very easy to lose track of that. And I think kids find themselves in that same position. So you can put this on private and public. That's something that we really emphasize in our internet safety presentations, is that if you have your account set to public, then that means anyone can potentially stumble on your profile, study all of the stuff that you are posting, and they can easily send you a more personalized message that you are much more likely to respond to versus a simple, hey, hi, what's up from a stranger. So make sure that you talk to your kids about having their account set to private if they're already not. I do also ask kids in person to raise their hands if they are in private. I'll say maybe like 50% of students will say they're on public. Twitter, you guys are also familiar with Twitter. There's X amount of characters that you can post per tweet. What's interesting is that I don't think a lot of kids have Twitter, at least not the younger ones. I think in high school, maybe like 10 to 20% of students will say that they have it. But the reason why I'm bringing it up is just because there's a lot of explicit content that can be found on Twitter. And something that I don't like about social media is how easy it is for kids to bypass the security features that are on there. So for instance, on Twitter, if you have an account, you can just simply, you were born, 18 years ago, and then you can easily access that material. There's not a lot of, there's just no deterrent for a kid to lie, like it's very easy for them to get away with saying that they're 18 and they can easily access that content. TikTok, oh my gosh, I can't even explain how much the children love TikTok. I'll say this is definitely the most popular app. I think this last year it was probably the most downloaded app in the world, I want to say, or at least the second. Just me uttering the words TikTok in person, like the kids lose their heads. Like they start laughing, they freak out, and I gotta like tell them to calm down. But I think the reason for that is because it's also used a lot for like humor type videos. These videos can be up to 1 minute long. And so a lot of people will have like these little cheesy skit type things. I will admit there are some pretty funny ones that I've seen. I won't tell that to the kids, but You can also talk and stuff on there. There was something that came to my attention maybe like a month ago where someone had actually live streamed their own suicide, and somehow that was being embedded in random videos on TikTok, and a lot of kids unfortunately were stumbling on this video, which is extremely traumatic. So there are times where just crazy things like that will happen. Another thing that worries me about TikTok is that there's this thing that kids like to do on there. They like to dance. There's a lot of choreography that goes into that. And it just worries me that there are cyber predators who are just, watching this stuff just willy-nilly. And there's a thing called the For You page, which is the most popular videos that are out there. I swear to you, it seems like these kids, like it is their ultimate goal in life to end up on this For You page. Because if you end up on that page, you're going to rack up views very quickly. That means you're going to get a lot of followers, and kids love that. That is instant validation that they are getting. And that's something that they talk about in that documentary, Social Dilemma, is that it's this crazy dopamine rush that we get when we get a like or a view or a follower, whatever it is, it feels good for us to get that as adults. And imagine how it feels for kids to have that instant validation. So a very slippery slope with that. It's important to make sure that they know that they don't spend so much time on this. My 25-year-old friend, she said that the first night she had TikTok, she literally didn't sleep the whole night because she was just scrolling through different videos, one after another. And the crazy thing about like all of the algorithms and stuff that they use for this is that it's very easy for these algorithms to guess which content we like the most. So, for instance, on YouTube, you might find one video and then you're going through a rabbit hole and all of a sudden you've been on YouTube for 4 hours. And that's because they're very good at, showing what other videos you might want to watch next. And so that also kind of applies to TikTok. And unfortunately, to get on the For You page, you do have to have a public account. And so I think that's why a lot of students will have their account set to public. So talk to them about TikTok, ask if they have it. I would bet money that most of your kids do. Just make sure that they're not talking with strangers and that they're not uploading, things that can be perceived as, not good. Twitch is going to be a streaming app primarily used for gaming. I've actually used Twitch a few times. I always wondered, why would anyone want to watch someone play a game? It sounds terrible. But if you're really into a specific game, I'm sure your kids play a lot of internet games. Let's say that there's like a level that they can never get past. They might go on Twitch to watch someone live stream them play that game. Unfortunately, like with all of these apps, there has been some explicit content that has been found on here, but personally, it's not something that I'm terribly worried about. They're owned by Amazon, and I think they're actually pretty good about taking down explicit content. But just so if you're aware of that, if you have any gamers at home and they use Twitch, this is basically what it is. Okay, so cyberbullying is going to be the next topic that we're going to talk about. I have to say that I was very shocked to hear how prevalent bullying was in schools. And this was before COVID, not just cyberbullying, but bullying in person. Of course, it's different now. But I can only imagine if we have a bunch of pent up kids who are struggling to express their negative emotions, there might be a lot of projection that happens. And then it's very easy to cyberbully someone. It's easier to bully someone through an electronic device than it would be in person. And I think that it's exceptionally important to talk about this topic now with our kids and ask them open-ended questions. Ask if they've ever seen cyberbullying happen, how it made them feel. Have they ever cyberbullied someone? Things along those lines. But whenever I ask kids in person, I'll say at least half the kids will say that they've been cyberbullied before. And it is important to emphasize the actual definition of bullying. So it has to be repetitive. It's not just one isolated incident. So if someone's mean just the one time, that's technically not cyberbullying. Bullying is a form of harassment, so it has to happen more than the one time. And it's kind of crazy that kids do this because it's so silly, because all you have to do is screenshot that thing that person was saying or take a picture of it, and then you can show it to your parents, and then they can show it to someone at school, and then that person can easily get in trouble. Make sure that you're encouraging your kids to report cyberbullying when they see it happen, especially if it's one of their peers at school. And I've actually asked kids, why don't you want to report bullying? And one of the main answers I get is that they don't want to be a snitch or a rat. And I'm like, you're in 6th grade, like what? But they are actually worried about that. They don't want to be perceived as that with their classmates. But what I tell them is that it's not like that when it comes to bullying, because in this situation, there's the bully and there's a victim. And in this case, you would be protecting the victim. You're not snitching on someone. You're actually trying to protect someone from some more harm that another person is inflicting on that person. But in Arizona, it is against the law to cyberbully and to bully. And again, the reason for that is because it is a form of harassment. There have been kids who have actually been in trouble for this, whether they were charged with a misdemeanor. In really intense and aggressive situations, they can actually be charged with a felony as well. So this is who you can contact. First things first is at the school level when you have that conversation with your kid. If they bring up that they've seen something, you can bring it up to their teachers or the counselors or the school principals. I would say talk to the teacher first, see what they tell you and what the best course of action is there. At the district level, you can also contact the superintendent. And then at the state level, the Department of Education. And then if there are threats of violence or you fear that someone can potentially get hurt or there's a really severe case of bullying that's happening, you can contact law enforcement to see if you want to press charges in those cases. So it really just depends on the situation. I had someone reach out to me, I guess like a couple of months ago now. They had to take down an Instagram account that was specifically like bullying students, and not just bullying, but they were just falsifying information. There were pictures of people's kids, and then underneath it would say that that kid was a racist, and it would go off and explain why. And so they reached out to me. I kind of gave them this list, let them know to talk to these people in this order, and then kind of go from there. But you can file a complaint with the Department of Education. So what can you do? Jill, when I was scheduling this with you, you asked what should parents do, to make sure that their kids don't accidentally stumble upon explicit content, even when they're not looking for it, whether they're playing games or Googling lyrics or something. It's very easy to stumble upon explicit content, even if you're not actively looking for it. You can actually enable some safety features on whatever web browser that you use. It's called Safe Search. And I'll give you a list of some resources that I have afterwards, and it'll tell you how to do that. Unfortunately, because there's like so many different types of electronic devices and different types of software, even internet browsers, everything is kind of different. And then you can also contact your internet provider to see if they have additional ways that you can protect your kid from finding that type of stuff. So know what accounts your kid have. I would just ask them flat out, what apps do you use? What social media accounts do you have? What games do you play? And then make sure that they are having those on private. Talk about the difference between bullying and someone being rude. So if they do say that they've seen bullying happen, make sure that it was just more than the one time. And to let them know to keep evidence of that by taking the screenshot or the picture. Be aware of the different trends and social media challenges that are out there. Kids can be very impressionable. And so if there's some crazy challenge to eat a Tide Pod and they think they can get really good views off of it, unfortunately, some kids will do that. So be aware of whatever that is. Some of them are pretty dangerous. And then let them know that they can always report inappropriate online activity. And if they see threats of violence in any way, you guys can contact the police if you're fearful that someone is actually, threatening someone. So sexting, definitely not my favorite portion to talk to about with middle schoolers. Not something I prefer personally, but it is important to talk to them about it. When we give this in schools, I think it's 7th through 8th grade, we talk about sexting, and then high schoolers 9th through 12th. So not the younger ones, obviously. but you kind of have to put 2 and 2 together. If you have a teenager and they're first starting to get in their first romantic relationship and they have a cell phone that has the ability to take photos and they feel pressured into doing it because maybe their friends are doing it or they saw it on television or they heard it in a song, well, then they might send these photos, even though they normally wouldn't. And you don't think that they would, but there are a lot of societal pressures that go into this. But especially if you know that their friends are doing it and they hear about it, then they're going to assume that that's normal. And if you're interested in someone and it's the first time you've been interested in someone, you think that this might be the way to keep them happy. Otherwise, they're going to move on to the next. Whatever is going through their heads. Sexting is a very important topic to talk about because it is considered to be child pornography and it can very easily get into the wrong hands. Let's say, especially if you're talking to someone online who ends up being a cyber predator, there are a lot of people who blackmail kids into sending explicit photos of themselves. And if they send it to them that one time, it's very easy for them to blackmail them to continue to ask for more of those photos. But it is unlawful for juveniles to intentionally or knowingly use electronic devices to transmit or display visual depictions of a minor that depicts explicit sexual material. And you can get in some serious trouble, whether it's a petty offense or a misdemeanor. There are also people who have been charged with felonies for this. So the only time that it is not unlawful for juveniles to possess this is if they didn't solicit the image, so they didn't ask for it. Maybe it was just sent to them. And if they took reasonable steps to destroy or eliminate the image or to report it to either you guys or someone at school or some form of law enforcement. That's the only time that it's not unlawful for them to have these photos. By the way, let me know if you want a PDF version of the presentation and I can send it to you and you can give it to parents who are interested. So as I said, it can be a class 1 misdemeanor, actually just to threaten to show the image. So let's say a boyfriend and a girlfriend break up, it's bitter. The girlfriend says, well, you sent me these pictures, I'm gonna send it to your friends. Even just threatening can actually get that person in trouble. And in the eyes of the law, it's actually worse to show these images through electronic means just versus showing them in person. When we gave this presentation to parents in person, maybe like last year or maybe 2 years ago, there were a mother and a daughter who were in the audience. And the daughter actually told the story about what had happened to her in regards to sexting. So she was 16 years old. She was in high school. She was in her first relationship. And one day when she was hanging out with her boyfriend, she decided to go through his phone. She discovered some explicit images between her boyfriend and her best friend. And so, of course, she was angry, like any person would be in that situation. So what she decided to do, though, is that she forwarded those images to a bunch of their classmates. And she actually ended up on the sex offender registry for that at 16 years old. Which can potentially ruin your entire life. It's difficult to get into college, university, to get a job, to even where you live is going to be dictated by that registry status. So just make sure that you're talking to your kids about that. Like I said, not my favorite topic to talk about, but it's definitely much needed because kids might not realize that it's against the law. And if things get blown out of proportion, then that can really affect their life. Culture Reframe, this is going to be a really good resource for parents to spot warning signs that your kid or teen might be looking at explicit content, especially pornography. And, you know, even just speaking from, again, like a brain standpoint, is when you're exposed to really explicit content at a younger age, it can kind of skew your perception of reality. And so you just want to make sure that you're nipping that in the bud. And so talking to them about it, it's uncomfortable. So Culture Reframed, write that down. There's a lot of hypersexualized media and there's a lot of pornography that they can stumble on, again, without looking for it. But, you know, it can become an addiction potentially too. So how to talk to your kids about sexting, make sure that you're communicating the legal ramifications of it. They might not know that it's legal. That itself might be a huge deterrent for a lot of kids, but also discussing what characterizes a healthy and unhealthy relationship. The best way to do that is to emulate it yourselves in your own relationships that you have. But talking about it, making sure that they understand that they shouldn't be doing things that they feel pressured into doing, and they don't have to do things that they don't want to do. And talking about that, I took a domestic violence webinar class like a couple of months ago now, and I'll have to get what the statistics are actually, but it's quite alarming. I think it was 1 in 7 teenage girls experienced domestic violence in teen relationships. And I think it's 1 in 11 males will also experience that. So talking to them about red flags and stuff to look out for in other people. Explain how quickly these images can get spread online and through cell phones, and explain that once you send an image, it doesn't actually truly go away. Emphasizing the importance of not forwarding explicit images that they receive themselves, and informing that they should also report those explicit images if they are of minors to you guys and then to school. So this is what to do if the minor's image is already out there. As you can imagine, that's going to be a pretty traumatic experience to have to go through. Maybe you were in a relationship with someone and you thought that you could trust them, and they were spiteful and they forwarded that image to a bunch of your friends, classmates, peers, family members. That can be horrific. So on the right side, you'll see suicide hotline number, which by the way, they're changing to a 3-digit number in the summer of 2022, which I think is awesome. And then you can also call some crisis number and stuff. But this happens. I gave this presentation to parents in Mesa, and I think one of the parents there was an attorney, and he actually had seen where someone was blackmailing this boy into sending explicit photos of him, and he actually took his own life because he didn't know how else to cope with that trauma, and he didn't think that he could get help in any way. So if you know of any people who've gone through this situation, just make sure that they have the appropriate resources. Cyber predators. This is the reason why I'm here to talk to you guys mainly about this topic, or for this reason. I do kind of use the term cyber predators and human traffickers a little bit interchangeably, just because there are a lot of similarities between the two, but they're also using the internet to exploit people for sexual or other abusive purposes. And also because the grooming process is something that we talk about in our human trafficking presentation specifically. When I say the words human trafficking, I think people typically think, okay, someone's getting kidnapped in a white van by a complete stranger. And the truth is that that's not the reality of the situation. What happens is that there's the grooming process that's involved. And so there's going to be a person, could be a cyber predator or a human trafficker online, let's say. They're going to start to groom a kid over the internet. They're going to pretend that they really care about them. They're going to say, oh, you've been fighting with your parents and your friends. Well, forget them. Let me just take care of you. Tell me how you're feeling. They're totally wrong. You're totally right. And so they're going to gain that person's trust. And then eventually they're going to manipulate them, and they're going to maintain control that way. And what happens a lot of the times too is that, you know, the victim in this case will have genuine feelings for this cyber predator or for this human trafficker, because they're filling that void and that need that that kid thinks that they, you know, need. And so ultimately, when they have their trust, it's very easy for them to manipulate them in all sorts of other ways. And so that's why it's important to talk to your kids about messaging strangers, because you don't truly know who is on the other side. And it can be as simple as receiving a message on Instagram. Let's say someone sends your kid a message and says, I really like that sweater that you just posted in your last picture. Where did you get it from? And then if your kid responds, it might be really easy for that to snowball into a deeper conversation, and then potentially them meeting up with them. So this is basically, yeah, the way that they manipulate kids. So grooming process. How predators target children: 80% will make contact through chat rooms and instant messaging. Over 50% of online sexual exploitation victims are between 12 and 15 years old. So that is very young. These are the different types of predators. This resource is called Teen Safe. You can look up more statistics and stuff about this, but sex offenders, these are going to be predators who are interested in having explicit online and potentially physical relationships with a child. Sextortioners are kind of what I was talking about, people who are going to blackmail kids into sending them more photos. And then pornographers, who are predators who are only looking and collecting photos and watching, and they don't think that they're doing anything wrong because they're not the ones who are actually perpetrating it. But of course, that's not true. 75% of victims who meet offenders face-to-face will do so more than once. Some risky behaviors that teens say that they engage in. So 86% of teens say that they chat online without their parents' knowledge. Ask your kids if they're chatting online, ask which apps that they are using, ask if they respond to messages from complete strangers. When I ask kindergartners if they receive messages from strangers, a lot of them raise their hands. That's pretty scary. Online gaming, also super popular with our kids, especially if they're using a headset. It's very easy to get to know someone better and quicker if they're using a headset. In fact, one of my coworkers who also gives this presentation said that she overheard her kid was using a headset and was telling the other person on the other side how old they were and where they lived. You know, like it was just the city, but still. So to make sure that they're not giving any personal information, and that once someone starts to ask about personal information, that they're logging off and exiting the chat room or the game, whatever it may be. And to definitely let you guys know about that so you can keep an eye on it. Internet crimes against children. This is going to be a task force that my office works closely with. So in my office, we have a criminal division. We do prosecute human traffickers. So internet crimes against children, they exist and they kind of help out with that type of stuff. This was a few years ago now, but essentially what happened is, you guys have probably seen How to Catch a Predator, or you might be familiar with the show. That's kind of what cops do in real life, is that they'll be in different chat rooms undercover and they want to see which people are potentially cyber predators. And then they'll, try to meet up with them or whatever. Also, be aware of your own social networking sites. If you guys are posting tons of stuff about your kids, especially like on Facebook or on Instagram, you might want to give your kid a shout out for their birthday, and then you post a picture of them and you tag them. Well, now guess what? They know when your kid's birthday is. They can click on their profile, get a front-facing picture of them. So there's just a lot of information that can be gathered from a lot of posts that you think might be kind of, you might not think about it, but if someone's looking for the information and you're willingly posting it for them, then it can be easy for them to gather that. Again, that's why it's important for you guys to also have your account set to private versus public. And that's because of child identity theft. Identity theft is a headache as an adult, but as a kid, it's really difficult because you might not even realize that your kid's identity is stolen until 10 years down the line when they're trying to get their first car or their first apartment. So just be aware of that. Some more stuff that you can do: familiarize yourself with the popular apps, websites, and video games. I've already said that before, but it's important. Know what types of capabilities those apps have. Set up privacy controls and restrictions. I never thought I'd be saying that, but I mean, technically they're your cell phones because you guys are paying for it. And it's, I'm not saying to invade their privacy, but to go to their privacy control settings and see what features you can enable. And to have a conversation with them and let them know that you're just doing that because you want them to be as safe as possible. Communicate the dangers of talking with strangers online. I feel like as much as we say this, kids don't actually realize how dangerous it can potentially be, especially our kids, because they were born and raised with the internet, so they might not think anything of it. So checking with your service provider to see if there's additional information. And then checking sex offenders in your area. All you have to do is Google sex offender registry. You'll just type in like your zip code or whatever. It's through the Department of Public Safety, I think. And it'll tell you also what level of offense and stuff that they are. These are reasons why students aren't reporting. They're afraid of retaliation from either the bully, a predator, or from their peers. They can be afraid of punishment. They might be embarrassed. So if it's explicit content that they're worried about and they don't know how to bring it up, they could be really embarrassed. So that's why it's important for you guys to bring up that conversation. They might just not want to get involved in whatever the situation is. And I think the main reason why kids don't report is because they're terrified that you guys are going to take their phone or their tablet or their, console away, whatever it is. So they're not going to tell you if there's any issues that are occurring. So it's important to bring up that you just want to talk to them about it, that you're not going to take things away. I mean, there might be instances where you should, but we're all pretty attached to our cell phones. It's very difficult to leave the house without it. And so if we feel this attached, imagine how attached our kids feel. This is going to be one of the last slides I leave up. I will go back to this. Hold on. This is the last one. Yeah. Okay. So on the right side, these are really good resources for you to have. If you guys have little ones, I'm talking like kindergarten through 2nd grade, NetSmarts, they have a lot of really cool things. They have like different games, different videos, a lot of interactive activities that they can do to learn more about internet safety. So don't talk to strangers, don't give out personal information. If you see explicit content, tell a trusted adult, basically the stuff that I was kind of outlining, but for them to understand. Teen Safe is where we got some of those statistics from. Common Sense Media is actually my favorite one. If you want to write that down, commonsensemedia.org is what it is, I believe. And I like it because it kind of breaks down all of the different apps and stuff that you might not fully understand. It can be very overwhelming and feel like you don't know anything about what our kids are using on the internet. But Common Sense Media, for instance, if you type in Roblox, it'll tell you what you should be worried about and what you shouldn't be worried about on there. And then other adults will kind of post what other issues they might or might not be having. So resources on here, Teen Lifeline, National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Of course, we hope that our kids will talk to us about this, but sometimes they might just not feel ready. And so at least it's nice to know that they have some sort of resource where they can talk to someone about it. And hopefully that person on that end of the line can convince them to reach out to you. So that is going to be it. I know I talk kind of fast and there's a lot of information, but I really appreciate you guys staying and listening. It's really difficult to get a group of parents this large. Usually they're about 4 people, and that's a really good turnout for when I talk to parents, whenever I schedule stuff with schools. And I think it's just because, we're all busy with our lives and you don't think about little things like some of the topics that I brought up. So if you're interested in us coming out to talk to your school, schedule a webinar or in person in the future when COVID kind of gets a little bit better, definitely reach out to us. They're free of cost. We'll travel the state. We are doing webinars primarily now. You can email or call, and I can go ahead and look at chat now to see what questions we have.
If you want, thank you so much, Tiffany. If you want, I can read the few questions that came up, and then we can kind of open it up if people have any questions. Bryn would like to know the penalties that you were talking about. Were they for adults or juveniles?
Those were for juveniles. So these are for well, I mean, it depends on the situation. This is primarily tiered towards juveniles, but I mean, potentially an adult can also get in trouble for this. But we say this just because, 2 kids in high school might think that they're not going to get in trouble because they're both minors, but you can still get in trouble for this.
And then the story about the girl who was placed on the sex offender registry, was that in adult court or juvenile court, or do you know?
I don't know for sure. It was one of my coworkers that was talking to that person, but I mean, it's really easy to get tried as an adult, you know, even when you're 16 and stuff. It's very easy for the legal process is very lengthy. If they really wanted to, they could try her as an adult and wait a couple of years, you know, totally up to them.
Okay, so we have someone who brought up Marco Polo. Do you have any, information or tips on that? She says that lots of my friends have it. My kid hasn't asked about it yet, but I'm less aware of the privacy in place.
I haven't heard of that. Do you know more about what that is?
Hi. So it's like video chatting. You like send messages, you record a message. It's not like live, but you record a message and you send it over to somebody. And from what I can tell, it's very like I had it for a while and I'm just bad at anything. Like just text me. I have texting, I have video calling on my phone. I don't need another app to video chat you, but it seemed like it just was who I connected with, like who was in my contacts and things like that. But I don't think there's any parent restrictions on it. And again, my kid hasn't brought it up. She's only 6th grade, so I don't know if it's like an old person thing now or what, but
yeah, I would look up on commonsensemedia.org, type in Marco Polo, and it'll kind of tell you what features you should be worried about, what the capabilities are of that app. And then parents, it's kind of like a little forum type thing where parents can also share any experience that they might have had with it. So that's commonsensemedia.org. It's so hard to keep up with all these different apps. But yeah, I'll look
it's like
into
a new one every day.
It's so
It's
insane.
funny. I've used that for movies before, like to see if a movie's okay, but I've never even thought about using that site for apps.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Other questions?
My other question was just Facebook Messenger. Anything, I don't know if you know anything about that, but I feel like as soon as pandemic hit, a lot of us got Facebook Messenger for the kids, and it seems pretty secure because again, I have visibility on a lot of their messages. It's only people I approve for them to connect with, but it's still Facebook, so it makes me nervous.
Yeah, it sounds like what you're doing is right. I mean, sometimes there are like hackers and stuff who might send mass messages out from someone's account where you click on some link or something. Just make sure your kids aren't clicking on those links. But it is pretty safe. And I mean, the way that you're going about it, where you're like having to accept those people is the best thing that you can possibly do, because otherwise you won't know what kind of strangers are talking to them. But just keep doing what you're doing. That's perfect, is just making sure that you're accepting people and you know who they are.
Andrea would like to know, do you guys have a recommendation for the age that kids should have their own cell phone? And additionally, what restrictions would you put on them?
I mean, obviously it's ultimately up to the parent. I understand the appeal of having the cell phone at a young age. I think the way to go about that maybe is, I had like a brick cell phone Nokia when I was in middle school. I couldn't even access the internet. I don't know if you want to maybe talk to your service provider to see if there's one that's a little bit not as much of a smartphone as, like iPhones and these other Androids are, so that they're not constantly on different apps, so that they can specifically still text you guys if they need anything, or definitely call you. But as for age recommendation, I mean, it's totally up to everyone. I know kindergartners who have smartphones, and that kind of scares me, but I get it. I get wanting them to have a cell phone. The restrictions, I would just say make sure that you go through the privacy settings of whatever that cell phone is, depending on the capabilities of that phone. And you can also put restrictions on the apps and stuff if they're using that. And then putting restrictions also on your internet provider and stuff that you can use on your laptop and computer. Anything else?
So Stuart is asking, what are some of the benefits of teaching our young folks social media and media literacy?
I think that kids don't think about all of the psychological aspects that I kind of brought up. And so I think when we talk to them about that, they kind of understand it more. And the way that I personally try to reach out with kids in that regard is that I tell them my personal experience, which you guys can do too, so that they kind of see, they can recognize their own behavior and recognize the patterns that they're having and any bad habits that they might have. Like, for instance, I bring up how I do bounce from app to app, which I said earlier. And then sometimes like an hour or two will pass. And so them just being more cognizant about that type of stuff. But when you bring up any bad habits that you might have when it comes to technology, then they might recognize those same patterns with themselves. And so that's why I think it's so crucial to talk to them from that standpoint, where it's not like you're just a parent and you're like, no, internet's bad. No, don't be on your phone. It's them kind of seeing it more from that psychological human perspective, and then being more introspective within themselves and recognizing the behavior that they have. I think it's so important to talk to them about this. It terrifies me how addicting, technology can be. And it terrifies me that our kids are so young having to go through this, because it's their normal life. It's the only world that they've ever known. Anything else?
I think that's it. I don't see anything else in the chat. So thank you for offering to send us this PDF. That would be wonderful. And then we can email it out to everyone who registered so that they have that handy. And then we'll include a couple of the other resources that were listed or discussed as well. So thank you so much, Tiffany, for being here. That was wonderful.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you guys so much for having me. Have a wonderful holiday season and a fantastic new year. May 2021 treat us a little bit better.
Yes,
Hopefully.
we're all hoping. Thank you.
Yeah, I won't hold my breath anymore. I'm just kidding. I feel optimistic.
We're trying.
All we can do. Yes.
Exactly. Well, thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
All right. And thank you everybody for being here. We will see you in January.